to be honest, 2025 has just been one giant reading slump for me. Hello you guys, what's up? Welcome or welcome back. My name is Daniela. I'm so happy you're here. Today I thought it would be fun to chat about a bunch of the books that I have read so far this year, give you my thoughts, tell you if I think they're worth reading or not. As of right now, I've read about 9 books this year, and I will say that I have just been kind of fighting a reading slump for most of the year. I haven't been super into what I've been reading. I don't know when exactly the slump started, but we'll kind of get into that as we talk about the books. So let's just dive right in. I started off this year reading Pictures of You by Emma Gray. I actually finished this book on January 1st. I started reading it in December and I started listening to it on audio, and I was so close to DNFing this book because I did not enjoy the audiobook experience at all. It was not for me. However, I happened to also have a physical copy out from the library while I was listening to it. So one night on January 1st, to be exact, I saw the book on my side table. I was about to DNF the audiobook and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna give the physical book a try. I was about 40% of the way into the book at that point, and so I picked up the book. It was already kind of late at night and I sped through the last like 60% of it. I read it all that night in one sitting. I stayed up until like 2 a.m. reading the book and I was just enthralled from that point on. Pictures of You is about a woman who wakes up from a coma one day. She finds herself in the hospital and they tell her, hey, you've survived. Unfortunately, like, your husband didn't make it. And she's like, what are you talking about? I'm 16 years old. I don't have a husband. And so they kind of come to realize that she has this total memory loss of everything that has happened to her, and she only remembers being 16. She remembers going to a party last night with her best friend, and she has no idea of anything about who she is, what her life is, anything that's going on after that. And so she's kind of playing this part of this mourning wife because she's going to her husband's funeral and she's looking at the slideshow, looking at the pictures of them together, and she's like, man, I have no idea who this guy is. I have no idea any of these things that we've done together. And so the story kind of goes along with her, and she meets someone from her past who she doesn't realize is from her past, but they kind of work together and she's trying to put the pieces back together of her life and figure out who she is, who she was. And it's a very interesting book. It's a very serious book. There are quite a number of trigger warnings. I definitely think read the trigger warnings before going into it because there's a lot going on here. But it's such an interesting story, and I ended up rating this one a 3.5 star. I think if I had read it physically from start to finish, it did have the potential to be maybe a 4 star. I'm glad that I picked up the physical copy and finished it in the end because I did really enjoy the way the author brought everything together and made everything happen. I think that beginning foundation was a little bit slow because it was just this blur of like what's going on, who is she, there's like a little bit of then and now. And so I think there were like a lot of pieces, but then once it kind of all came together, I think the author did a beautiful job telling the story and I enjoyed it. I'm glad I ended up picking up the physical copy and not just DNFing it because I think it's worth the read. Then I decided to pivot a little bit and I picked up Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. This book is maybe why I'm in a reading slump to begin with. But this book follows Kaz. He is a young man, a boy. He's like 17 or 18 years old. He's not quite a man, but he is a thief. It says on the back of the book that he's a criminal prodigy. So Kaz is offered this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to steal this insane thing that like shouldn't even exist, but he is being given the opportunity to go and take it and receive an insanely large sum of money in exchange for getting this thing. So he kind of bands together this ragtag group of criminals and people that he works with, people that he knows, colleagues, people that he only knows of. Some of them like each other, some of them really do not like each other. So there's a lot of tension in this group, but it is just such a good like found family, and they go on this big adventure to try and steal, it's like a serum thing that they're trying to steal, and they go on this like adventure of all adventures, this like heist of all heists, and I loved it so much. I've talked about it already so many times, so you're probably sick of hearing about it from me. I read it in this vlog if you want to see me reading it and see all of my reactions, but I really loved everything about this book. It is 5 stars for me. I love the characters, I love the dynamics, the relationships, the way that they like bonded and grew together, the yearning and the tension, the little bits of romance, the very, very tiny crumbs of romance that we've gotten here. I loved it all. I still have not moved on and read the second book yet, and I am now a little bit nervous to read it because I think this put me in a pretty big reading slump, and now I don't know if reading the second book, Crooked Kingdom, is going to take me out of the reading slump or make it even worse. So far I've just read Six of Crows. Let me know what I should do, if I should keep reading it right away or maybe wait. I have also kind of been wanting to wait until I'm in like a better headspace. I can give it all of my attention and energy. But yeah, that is Six of Crows. I really, really liked this one. After I read Six of Crows, I picked up The Secret Book of Flora Leah. This is by Patty Callahan Henry. I have read many books by this author before and really, really enjoyed them. She writes historical fiction. This book is about Hazel and Flora. They are sisters and they grow up during World War II. They get sent away from their home in London to this beautiful, like small countryside village where they live this very sweet, idyllic life together in the face of the war. And one day something goes terribly wrong and Flora goes missing. She disappears, never to be found again. So it kind of goes between these then and now timelines, the then being growing up in the 40s during the war, and the now timelines are set in the 60s when Hazel, the older sister, is now in her 30s. She's never found Flora, and it's always been this big gap in her life because she feels responsible for losing Flora. She thinks that it's her fault that Flora went missing. She was supposed to be taking care of her. Now Flora is gone. So it's this like deep-rooted mystery of like Flora is missing, and then Hazel on her very last day of work at a rare bookstore comes across this first edition illustrated book called Whisperwood and the River of Stars. And it's like a children's book and it's very beautiful, and Hazel opens it up and her jaw's on the floor because Whisperwood was her and her sister's secret story together. So they would escape together when they were children and they would pretend that they were in this magical world called Whisperwood, and Hazel never told a single person about it in her life. So she has no idea how someone could have come up with this idea all on their own and turned it into a book. So this kind of like sets Hazel's whole life upside down because now she believes Flora is still out there. She truly thinks like Flora must be alive to have told this story to someone. Maybe she's the author of this story, who knows? And so she sets out on this journey to try and find her sister 20 years later. I really liked this book. I have it in my story graph as rated 5 stars. I think it's really a 4-star book objectively. I just like love Patty Callahan's writing so much that I wanted to give it a 5-star, but I do think that it wasn't like quite a 5-star read for me. But if you love like a cozy historical book with a little bit of a mystery and definitely strong like London war, post-war vibe, it's definitely unexpected. I will say I was maybe a little bit disappointed in the ending and in the way it came together, but overall I really liked it. I love her writing and it was so easy to follow, and you just wanted to be with these characters and live in this world. That's what I felt. And so I think I'm gonna settle on a 4-star for this book, but really loved it. One that I think about fondly and one that I'm really, really glad to have on my shelves. Okay, after this, I had been hearing about this new release book that everyone was reading and going absolutely feral for. I think every reader of every genre was picking up this book and saying, oh my gosh, I'm obsessed with this book. And so I had to pick it up too. I had to see what all of the hype was about. And that is The Favorites by Lane Fargo. I decided to do this one on audiobook because I heard that it was a fantastic audiobook, very reminiscent of like Daisy Jones and the Six in the interview style. And I'm glad I did the audiobook for this one actually. I did really enjoy it in this format, and I think that really worked for me. The Favorites is about 2 figure skaters, and it kind of goes like spans most of their life from when they're teenagers well into adulthood, and it shows their origin story, how they really came from nothing and built their way up into becoming Olympic figure skaters. It is dramatic, it is toxic, it is like there's so much drama and gossip and like tension, and all of these characters, you just want to like strangle them and shake them, and you're like, what are you thinking? Why are you making these choices? Everyone is doing the wrong thing over and over and over again, and it's just a hot mess. But so incredibly well put together. I felt like going into this book there would be no way that I wouldn't love it, and I did really enjoy it. I won't say it was a 5-star. For me it was really a 4-star, because I enjoyed my time with it, but I think like I do kind of need likable characters for a book to be 5 stars for me, and not one of these characters was likable. I also think the way that the ending came together, there were a few things that I was like, really? Like but the whole story as a whole, the figure skating, the drama. Oh, something that a lot of people have said that I think is so true is that like you want to go on and Google, okay, what was their routine? What did it look like? You just like feel like you're there with them. You can feel the cold of the ice rink and the tension and like the competition and everything that goes on. It is intense, it is dramatic, and it's so fun. I would say that this is like a true winter book. Like I don't think I would recommend reading it any other time of year. A fun little palate cleanser. You're gonna get frustrated with these people because they're annoying and crazy, but it's also, you're like, what would I do in that situation? I don't know. It is like when you think it's reached a like certain level of unhinged, she goes farther. I really enjoyed the formatting of it because it went kind of between like our main character Katerina, she would be telling the story of her life and of her and her partner's skating career, and then it would go into like press releases or interviews, and it all is kind of centered around this documentary I believe that they're making about her. So she's kind of telling her true story, and then it cuts to people in interviews giving their takes and being like, I remember when this happened and it was ridiculous. And so yeah, you don't really like any of the characters. I wasn't really rooting for any of them, but I was there, I was sad, I was along for the ride. I had a good time with this one, and I did think that it was very fun. It was really after the favorites, I think, that I had realized that I was in a reading slump. I didn't want to pick anything up. I think the favorites was good, but like the unlikability of the characters kept me from wanting to read and kept me from wanting to pick anything new up. And so at this point I knew I was in a bit of trouble. I think I finished the favorites around the end of January, and then I had realized about mid-February I hadn't picked anything up in a while. So I decided to do like a little reading slump diaries, if you will. I did start a vlog. It has not seen the light of day. It will not see the light of day. I never finished it. But my first step was that I wanted to reread an old book that I had read before, because I thought if I could reread a book that I knew I enjoyed, that I felt comfortable with, maybe that will help me out of my reading slump, and it'll reset my brain to move on. And so I decided to pick up Arsenic and Adobo by Mia P. Mansala. And when I looked back at my Storygraph or Goodreads rating the first time I read it, I gave it 2 stars, and I don't remember that. I remember enjoying it in my head. I remember having a good time with this book. I did decide to raise my rating to 3 stars this time. This isn't like a life-changing, revolutionary book by any means, but it is a fun palate cleanser in a reading slump kind of book. This book is about Leela, and Leela has just moved home from Chicago to her small town of Shady Palms, and she is living with her aunt and her grandma, and she's helping them run their family restaurant, their family business. One day her ex-boyfriend comes in, and he's like this big food critic now, but he leaves like scathing negative reviews, and he comes in with their landlord, who is his stepdad. They come in for lunch, they're pretty rude, and then once they finish lunch, they look over and Derek, her ex-boyfriend, is face down in his dessert, completely unconscious. They call 911 and they're like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And he's still alive. He leaves the restaurant, and then later that day they find out that he has died. And so the police think that Leela and her family are the main suspects. Of course, he was last seen alive there. Obviously he was rendered unconscious in their restaurant, and they believe that Leela and her family poisoned Derek because he was leaving bad reviews. They just wanted to get rid of him, and so now they are murder suspects. This is just like a fun, silly, cozy mystery. It's actually the start of a whole series, and they're all like revolving around this family and this restaurant. It was fun. Like, it's not anything to write home about, but it's a great book. It's very silly. The food writing is fantastic. The family like tensions and drama are just so true to life and so real, and I think that this is a great, like, if you're into a cozy mystery, this is a pretty good one. Then we had another new release that I was just seeing everywhere and I knew was going to be right up my alley, and so I ran out and I picked it up right away, and that is The Rose Bargain by Sasha Payton Smith. If you watched my spring books video that I just posted, I talked about this pretty at length there. This book is essentially like Bridgerton meets The Cruel Prince. It is so fun. It is the start of a series, but it doesn't end off in a way that you like have to pick up the second book right away. I think it's totally fine to read the first book and then I'm ready for the second book to come out. I'm excited for it. I'll definitely be picking it up, but I don't feel like there's this like gaping hole in my soul that I'm missing. This book follows, I think her name is Ivy. Ivy lives in like Regency, England. Everything is the same, everything is normal, except for England has been taken over hundreds of years ago by a fairy queen. So the queen has come in, she like murdered the king of England, and now she is the queen, and she and her son are the only fairies in all of the land. Everyone else is human and everything works kind of as normal. It is Ivy's turn to enter the dating pool, enter the dating season in London, and this year the queen's son, the prince, has decided he wants to take a wife, and so the queen has decided to hold a competition for all of these girls entering the season if they would like to bid to become the future queen consort. And so the story kind of goes from there. There's a lot of drama, there's a lot of fairy magic. The fairies, something I didn't realize until I read The Cruel Prince is that fairies are like low-key evil, and these ones are pretty nasty. They do some pretty crazy stuff. So we follow Ivy kind of as she enters the season. She has her own unique reasons for entering the season that are very different from just finding a husband, and she's trying to solve a few mysteries. She makes some allies, she makes some friends, she definitely makes some enemies along the way, and I ate this book up. I do wish I had waited, because I ended up rating this book 4 stars, and I know that this would be a 5-star book if I wasn't in a reading slump, because I know that this is exactly my kind of book, exactly what I would love, but I just wasn't in the headspace for it. I just wasn't focused on it. Every time I picked it up, I enjoyed it, but then when I put it down, I wasn't thinking about it. I wasn't interested in picking it back up, which is kind of the theme of all of these books, is that like they were taking me a while to get through because I didn't want to pick them up, because I didn't want to keep reading. I just wasn't in the mood for that. I'm definitely gonna reread this one because it's right up my alley. I think the writing was good, the storyline so well done, and I had a lot of fun with it. I think that if I was in the right headspace, for sure it would be a 5-star book, no questions asked. But I highly recommend this one, and I think it's perfect for spring. You know, the London dating season just feels so springy to me. Plus, like, the cover is so springy. Highly recommend this one. I feel like we're gonna be seeing it everywhere this year. I read The Rose Bargain, and I was like, you know what? I know I would have loved that book. I am so in a slump. What I need to do is pick up a favorite book and see if I can get through that. And for me, there's only one author that I know can get me through a reading slump, and I was like, if this doesn't work, I don't know what will. Like, I don't know what's gonna help me. So I decided to pick up Funny Story by Emily Henry. This was one of, if not my very favorite book of last year. I love Emily Henry. I love everything she's written, and I had just been kind of craving a reread of this story. I rated this book 5 stars when it first came out, when I first read it last year, and honestly, I think I enjoyed it even more the second time around. It was slow to get into for me because I was just not in that headspace of reading, but I found myself by like 1/3 of the way in, I found myself thinking about it all the time. Like, I would be cooking dinner or I would be running errands and not have the book with me, and I would just be thinking about these characters. I would just be thinking about Daphne and Miles and what is going on in Waning Bay, and like Miles's sister, and just all of these characters that I love so dearly. And so I would say that this was successful in what it needed to do, in that it proved to me that I can get out of a reading slump because I can be really invested and really into it. As soon as I read it, I wanted to keep reading, and it did exactly what I needed it to do. I love this book forever and ever. I'm not gonna go into the plot. I'm sure you've heard what it's about, but I think even on the reread, it's proven to be a 5-star favorite, 6-star favorite forever and ever. And I already want to read it again. Like I might read it again this summer. After I picked up Funny Story, I then made a big mistake because I thought I would stay kind of in my comfort zone and not branch too far out, and so I decided to pick up the Vows. Now, here's where I went wrong. I had already started the Vows a little while ago and I wasn't really into it, but I was about 40% of the way through and I thought, you know what, like I've just reached that middle point, or I'm just about to reach that middle point where everything clicks, and then that's when you get really into a book, you know? So I was like, I'm gonna give this one a chance. I've already done like the hard work of getting into the world, getting to know the characters. I wasn't really enjoying it. I thought it's okay because like now this last half is probably what's gonna bring it all together for me. And I don't really want to say anything bad about this book because I know it's a lot of people's very favorite book of all time. It just wasn't working for me. I don't really love reading about spice and reading spicy books. And like Funny Story is a fairly spicy book, I would say. I think though that the plot outside of the yearning and the spice is so strong. There was so much more going on in Funny Story. There's so many characters, so many relationships, and so many things happening that I didn't really mind the spice, because in this world that Emily Henry has created, there's so much more going on. I felt like the Vows, especially once I reached like 60-70%, was just spice the whole time. There was no plot. There was this like small plot of like, yeah, they're trying to like save their best friend's wedding. They're trying to like work together, but like every single line was like, oh, I'm thinking about this, or oh, we wanted to, like, every single line had something with spice in it, it felt like, and it just got very repetitive to me and very exhausting. And then there was one certain scene, I got really far in this book, you guys, like I was like well over 200 pages into this book, and then we reached this one scene where I was like, okay, like I've had enough. It is really bringing me back into that slump, really taking me out of the book and out of the story, because it's just like one thing layered onto another. And I don't know if it's like my mindset going into it, if it was because I didn't read it kind of in one go. I like read it broken up with other books in between, but unfortunately the Vows was not for me. And I don't know if it's gonna be like a hard DNF, because I know so many people love this book, and I know I've even seen on Instagram people will be like, well, I didn't really like it, and then I came back to it when I was in kind of the right headspace and I absolutely loved it. So maybe I'll be able to give it another chance in the future. And again, I don't really want to talk poorly about it because I know so many people love it so much. It just really, at this moment in time, was not working for me. After this, I decided to take a little bit of time off from reading. I knew that nothing was really working for me and I didn't want to keep forcing it. Earlier this week, I wanted to kind of get back into it, so I decided to start reading the books on my TBR for March and just focus on those books and see how many of them I could get through. So far, I have finished one, and that is The Wishing Game by Meg Schaffer. This book has been on my physical TBR forever. For like well over a year now. I started it last spring. I made it like 80 pages into it or so, and then put it down, not for any reason. I was enjoying it, but it just kind of got put down and then lost in the abyss of reading. So I decided to pick this one up because I knew I was already a bit of a way into it, and I thought that would help me get through it quicker. And I did. I read the rest of it in one afternoon and I enjoyed this one. I think I decided on like a 3.5, 3.75 stars for this book, but this book is about Lucy, and Lucy works as a teacher's aide, and she is trying to adopt a young boy who has lost his parents that she's very, very close with. Unfortunately, she can't afford to adopt him, and so he's just stuck in the foster system right now with a bunch of families that she knows she could take better care of him than they are. And so she's kind of heartbroken because she doesn't have the money. She's just like a teacher's aide. She does some other jobs on the side. And then one day, her very favorite childhood author decides to hold a competition where he is going to give away the manuscript of his final book that he's written. So he invites a select collection of fans to the island that he lives on, and he decides to hold a competition between all of these contestants, and whoever wins gets to have the only copy of the manuscript. There's like some fine print involved, but that's the gist of the story. I heard that this was like magical realism. I didn't find that there was anything magical about it. I thought it was very sweet. I finished this book a few days ago. I haven't thought about it again since. I did enjoy my time reading it though, and I would be interested to read this author's other work. It was not perfect, but the intention was really good, and I think the story was good and fun, and definitely something that's very unique and not something that I've ever read before. So that is the last book that we have to talk about today. That is The Wishing Game by Meg Schaffer. Alrighty, that is my little wrap up of everything that I've been reading so far in 2025. Let me know if you have any book recommendations of things that can get me out of a reading slump. I am currently listening to Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies on audiobook and really enjoying it. Thank you so much for being here. I love ya, and I will hopefully see you in the next one. Bye!